Coming up next on the Wet Fly Swing podcast.
For me, it's my employees. I mean, they're into it. They love fishing. Love it. And like these guys are going out after work, before work, skipping work. And they talk about it. They learn from one another. And they're going on little trips. It's great. I mean, it's just awesome to just see how passionate they are about it.
That was Greg Epstein with the why behind his running of the fly shop, JH Fly Co. today on the Wet Fly Swing Fly Fishing Show.
Welcome to the Wet Fly Swing Fly Fishing Show, where you discover tips, tricks, and tools from the leading names in fly fishing today.
How's it going today? Thanks for stopping by the show. We've still got the Top Fly Challenge going on. Right now, you can head over to wetflyswing.com/topfly and choose your top fly from the guests we've had on the show. And you can choose your own personal one. You'll get a chance to win a box of flies. Greg Epstein walks us through his fly fishing story and how Jackson Hole Fly Company came to be. We hear some pretty crazy stories from Greg, including one on a very near-death miss on the mountain while in the backcountry skiing. He got buried, almost buried alive. We also find out what gets Greg fired up these days and how and why he took on the JH Fly Co. project. This is a good behind-the-scenes kind of to see how the sausage is made. We dig into it today. Hope you enjoy Greg's perspective on fishing and life as much as I did. You can go to JH Fly Co. right now and get 25% off your first order with Jackson Hole at jhflyco.com/swing. That'll get you 25% right now. Check it out. Before we get started, go check out what they have. That would be amazing. So, without further ado, here he is, Greg Epstein from Jackson Hole Fly Company. How's it going, Greg?
Hey, it's going great. It's great to be with you guys today, and I'm excited to talk about fishing and what we do here in Jackson Hole.
Nice. Yeah, me too. I'm excited to dig into some fishing too, because we haven't sat down and talked, any about fishing. We've talked a lot about some products and things like that, but I want to dig into that. You've got the Jackson Hole Fly Company. You sell flies and rods, and you kind of got the full list of things. We're going to touch on that and talk about how some of the listeners can get some value there. But take us back quickly to how you first got into fly fishing, and then we'll jump into all the other stuff.
Oh, sure. Well, I think most kids growing up in Wyoming or Northwest Wyoming, fishing was just one of those things you did with your parents or your dad or whatever. And we used to go on a lot of camping trips, family camping trips, and we would go fishing. Not as much fly fishing at that point in time, but definitely getting out fishing and lake fishing and some fishing on like the Snake River and stuff like that. And then I kind of left doing fishing for quite a long time. As I got older and through college, I was interested in other things like ski racing and playing soccer, and so fishing wasn't a big priority for me. And in 2001, I believe, I moved up to Alaska for a little bit of time, and I started getting back into fishing a little bit there, fishing for salmon and stuff like that. I was living in Girdwood, Alaska, which is about 40 miles outside of Anchorage. It's part of right near on the Turnagain Arm, and there's a bunch of rivers and little creeks and just a lot of places where salmon spawn in the summer. So started getting back into fishing for salmon with some friends, and they were kind of showing me how it's done and stuff up there, and that was pretty cool and pretty fun, but it wasn't quite the passion. It was just kind of something you went and did, and it was for food, and smoking salmon's always great. I mean, it's one of my favorite foods. So and doing it yourself is pretty cool. Kind of figuring out the brine mixture and all that's pretty cool. So anyway, and then again, kind of went a little bit away from fishing again for a while. My ski career, as far as what it was, turned into a professional photography career. And so I was following around and chasing around professional ski and snowboard athletes all over the world. Ended up being head of production with a company called Teton Gravity Research, who creates ski and snowboard films, and I think mountain bike films at this point as well. And they're based here in Jackson Hole. And so, fishing kind of went away again for a little while. And but then in 2010, I met my now wife, and she was pretty new to the Valley, had lived in Jackson for about 3 or 4 years, but she just jumped into everything when she moved here. And one of the things she jumped into was fly fishing. And at the same time, I also had a handful of buddies, some who were good at fly fishing and some who were kind of just taking it up. And we kind of all just started fly fishing together. And with my wife being interested in it and actually passionate about it, it was fun for she and I just to get out and go do it. And so we started doing that together, and it was fun. And again, I'd go on some trips with buddies, and we'd go and fly fish and do other things as well. And then in 2014, this is kind of when things really turned for me. I got caught in an avalanche skiing, got destroyed.
Oh, wow.
Messed up my body, messed up, broken pelvis, broken leg, a bunch of stuff. I was out. And so really the only thing I could do was stand in a boat and cast a rod.
Amazing. Amazing.
So yeah, no, it was nuts. So for a couple years, I was only, that's kind of what I did. And so, my friends would take me out, and I'd just go fish, and I could go camping and stuff like that. But it was really about standing in a boat and casting the rod and just getting better and better at it and figuring it out. And actually, it started to become a passion then. It wasn't just sort of a hobby or a thing that you go do. I started just, getting into it and learning and wanting to learn more and more about it. And so that's kind of brought me to here in 2019, about 2018. We had heard that this company, Jackson Cardinal, was for sale in Jackson. And it was a fly fishing distribution company started by this guy, Kirk Stone, in 1978. And so my wife and I started poking around, trying to figure out, okay, what's going on? Is this a viable business? Things like that. And through our first round of diligence, we realized, well, maybe it's not quite the business we thought it was. There was a couple things that didn't, with those original sniff test didn't quite pencil out for us. So we walked away. And then in 2019, I reapproached Kirk and just said, hey, are you still trying to sell that? And I mean, this business is literally around the corner from my house, which is also pretty great. But yeah, so in 2019, we went through the diligence again and realized, hey, I think we can make this Jackson Cardinal business pencil. And I had the idea in my head for Jackson Hole Fly Company, and that was a startup. So, here we are now, 2.5 years in, and business is going well, and it seems like people are enjoying fly fishing. So, and more people are getting into it.
Yeah, exactly. So you touched on a few things there, and that's what I love about the podcast is that, that idea of fly fishing saving you has actually come up a number of times with guests, and, for you as well, right? You almost died, it sounds like, in this avalanche. Take us there a little bit to this avalanche accident just for a minute.
Yeah.
What was that like? I mean, were you literally, how do you feel? Were you were close to death? I mean, what does that feel like?
So to kind of just think back on that, I don't know. It was interesting. So
do you remember it?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Do you remember every bit of it?
Every bit of it. I was never unconscious, and I was never buried. So those are two things, a lot of people, when they hear about avalanches, they, immediately think that you're buried and, suffocation and that sort of stuff, which, for a lot of avalanches is typical. But for me, it was less about being buried. I had an airbag, which is one of those, you pull a little handle and these big flotation sort of airbag things pop out, and it kind of keeps you on the surface of the snow. And so you don't get buried. Unfortunately for me, I got the where I got caught in the avalanche was in a chute that had a dog leg in it, but the velocity of the avalanche was so high that I got pitched where the dog leg is off that edge and kind of just went airborne for, I don't even know. I mean, at that point, in my mind, I was like, is this the end? Because I knew where I was in reference to the mountain, but I was like, I don't really remember there being a large cliff, but it ended up that it was more like a ski jump that I hit. And so then when I landed in a bunch of small trees, and one of them hit my ski, and that's what shattered my leg. And then I think the impact of just being pitched into the air, again, I don't even know how high. It was like being shot out of a cannon, how high I was in the air. But when I landed, I'm pretty sure that's what broke my pelvis. And, so fortunately, I mean, this is the fortunate thing about living in a community like Jackson Hole, is we have an amazing search and rescue. We have amazing ski patrol. The coordination between all these different agencies, because you're in the Grand Teton National Park was part of this. Mm-hmm. Jackson Hole Mountain Resort was part of this. Teton County's search and rescue is all part of this. I got helied out. And it was, 4 to 5 hours of time before, from the accident to me getting pulled out of the mountains was like 5 hours of time, 4 hours of time. So I was very hypothermic. I had internal bleed.
Wow. So you were sitting there for 4 hours and just sit right there in the one spot?
Yeah. I mean, I was with ski partners. I wasn't by myself. I had 3 other people who were all very knowledgeable with first aid and rescue and things like that. So I was in good hands with my ski partners. But yeah, I was sitting out there, in one spot exactly, except when the ski patrol came, then they moved me into a sled and got me down to the helicopter, and then, out on the helicopter. But yeah, I was very hypothermic by the time, the rescue and internal bleeding, of which I didn't really, I didn't know. I didn't know anything. All I knew is that I was not externally bleeding, because immediately after the avalanche, I checked a couple spots on my body where, I just took all the muscle and whatever. I was in so much pain, but I was like, I just got to check to make sure I'm not going to bleed out here on the hill. So.
Right. So that is crazy, that whole story. So you come out of this thing. I mean, now it sounded like you were into the extreme sports. Do you still ski and do all this now?
I ski a lot still. I don't ski out in the backcountry as much as I used to. And I have a 2.5-year-old daughter now. So I want to pay it forward, trying to teach her how to ski now. So I spent a lot more time this winter skiing with her and my wife. And really, it wasn't that good of a winter here, which is something we can talk about later on in the podcast, regarding snowpack and things like that. But so it was actually a great year to ski with my 2.5-year-old. And yeah, I'm not as gung-ho doing that anymore. I've just kind of reprioritized my life a little bit, and it was a wake-up call. I mean, I've had friends perish in the mountains all through, my adult life, whether it's avalanches or falling. It's part of the game of,
How much of a part of a game is it when you think, because you hear these stories, but is it fair? I mean, I guess it's not common, but I mean, you've had friends that have died. Is that just part of the game when you're in the extreme sports? Is it just, it could happen to you? I mean, it could happen to anybody.
I mean, avalanches, as much as you may be a snow safety expert and an avalanche expert, nothing's 100%. And, you get into a bad situation, over the wrong exposure or just massive amounts of snow. And yeah, it can go bad real quick.
Right.
When I worked for Teton Gravity Research, I was the head of production, but I also was one of the people who helped create and write the risk management program for all the athletes, for when we film.
Oh, wow.
And we had a main guy named Kent Sheeler, who, he was the one who kind of was the brainchild behind all the real nitty gritty and specifics. But, I was the person right there with him. We would have these courses every year and, refresher courses, advanced first aid, and just how we operate in the mountains. And, if there is a situation where, somebody gets hurt or something catastrophic happens, we all know how to operate. So I was on it, and I knew in my mind when I got slid, I knew how to run the rescue, even though I was in a lot of pain. I was still right there. Until later on, as 3-4 hours in, and I'm in a lot of pain and going hypothermic, then you start to lose your cognitive ability, and a lot of it, I was just like, okay, let's just get out of here. This is brutal right now.
This is this is really interesting. This story is definitely crazy. And then but you also have all these other stuff. I mean, the photography, we could probably spend a whole episode just talking about photography tips. I know on your website I see a lot of the photos. I was looking through some of the stuff, and yeah, they all look like pro photos. That's something we could probably dig into some tips. But let's jump into, I want to talk more about Jackson Hole Fly Company, because I want to make sure we don't miss some of those items just on what you guys do there. Yeah, so let's jump into that, and if we have time at the end, we'll circle back to some of the extreme sports that you're into. This is totally. So tell me, let's just start with Jackson Hole. So describe. I mean, you've obviously told the story about how you got here, but talk about what you guys do now. Like what are the products you guys have? What are the things that you're selling, and then who is kind of that person, that target customer you're looking for?
Sure. So a little bit to pick up where I had left off. We bought that company, Jackson Cardinal, which is a fly fishing distributor wholesaler. And I knew that going direct to consumer was in my business model. I knew that that was the next step for me. So, immediately after we purchased that company, I created Jackson Fly Company, and it took, 6-8 months from basically saying, here we go, to having the website completed and, all the branding and all the marketing and everything kind of rolling. It took about 8 months. And so we opened our doors for Jackson Hole Fly Company on April 15th, 2019, essentially when all the lockdowns were happening because of COVID. And I remember my wife saying, she was like, I hope I didn't underwrite something that's, just going to get beat up because of this, pandemic and things like that. And I'm like, well, I guess we'll see. And, fingers crossed. But, that's where fly fishing, I feel like in the last 2 years, for a lot of the just average people who have novices they got into it, or they were curious. And so our customer is really that person who may have a little bit of an idea about fly fishing, maybe have heard about it, maybe have gone out with friends and maybe have tried it, maybe have casted a rod a little bit, but they're novices. They're people that are curious. They're people that want to get outdoors. They're people that maybe don't want to go do hardcore sports like mountain climbing or trail running or mountain biking or things like that, but they want to get out. They want to camp. They want to fish. They want to go hiking, and and this just creates another avenue of seeing amazing country and doing pretty cool stuff. And fly fishing, for a lot of people, I think helps them disconnect from their day-to-day life and just it's a little bit of a zen sort of activity. And you learn. I mean, there's so much to learn when you're out there fly fishing. It's a puzzle every day.
So I think that is, you hit on it as far as that person. And I heard from somebody yesterday, Damon, who was a new listener, and I get these emails pretty much every day that are, they find the podcast, and he said, hey, I'm brand new, and, I found your back catalog, and he was listening to some of the older episodes. And he's just love, right? He's just picking it up and digging in. And for him, right, he would love to find something that's like, okay, here's a package I need to get started. And that's one of the things you guys do, right? That's what I have, one of your rods, which is.
Yeah. So one of our focuses is what we call the basics package, which basically we have two levels. We have a fly rod, a 5-weight fly rod, 9 foot. That's IM6 graphite, so it's pretty durable. Comes with a pretty basic graphite reel, but it'll get you out there, and it's all loaded up, spooled, and it comes with a couple of other, like some leaders and nippers and forceps and stuff like that. So it comes with kind of a basic package to get somebody out there who doesn't want to spend a ton of money to go fly fishing. I think that it's under $200 for the fly rod and everything like that. And it is called the hold on, I got this right here. It's called the Crystal Creek package, and it's $185.
Wow.
And it's a good rod, and it'll get you out there, and you can have an enjoyable time. And you're not going to spend a ton of money on something that maybe you decide you don't like, or something that you only do once or twice a year. Then we also have our other basics package, which is called the Flat Creek, which is just around $580, but that is an IM8 fast action rod. It's one of our Yellowstone 2 rods, which I would, put up against any fairly high-end or high-end rod in the industry. I fish them. I love them. I think they're great. Our Yellowstone Grizzly aluminum reel, and then it comes with an assortment of flies, your gel, your basic things you need, leaders, nippers, the whole works. And so that's $580, and that's a rod package that will last you a lifetime. We have a great lifetime warranty, and we have really fast turnaround for rod warranties. A lot of companies right now, they're 2, 3, 4 months out to get your rod back if you snap a tip or break your rod. We can get your rod turned around. Basically we'll fix it the day or day after we get it and turn it around right away. So, a week or 2 at the most is typically the amount of time that the rod will be out of your hands. So that's something we really pride ourselves on.
So basically it has the package. So basically you get, if you haven't been fishing, or if you have been fishing, you can get a package ready to go. And then along with that is flies, right? You guys talk about your fly selection a little bit. How does that look? What are you guys doing there?
So we have, I would say it's around 1,000 patterns. But we do have some saltwater patterns mixed in there. That's not our primary focus, but we do. But we have everything you're going to need, for even the expert fly fisher person. We have everything you need to as far as fly patterns, fly sizes. One thing we're really focusing right now is actually improving our foam selection a little bit more. A lot of people have moved to fishing with foam flies, so Chernobyl chubbies or micro chubbies, things like that. And so we're focusing on that a little more. We're also focusing on a little bit more tungsten jigs. Tungsten jigs have become fairly popular. Sort of the Euro nymphing has become fairly popular. So we're trying to round out our fly selection with tungsten, but we're also improving or adding on to other fly patterns that maybe we have but could be improved upon, or maybe we don't have, and but they're patterns that customers are asking for, or people that work in my shop are recommending, say, hey, we should maybe get these tied or these tied. And then I'm also cutting out some old patterns that just don't really sell anymore, or maybe sell 10 of them a year.
10 of them. That's what I was going to ask you. What are if you had to look, and I'm not sure if you even know this, but what are those, if you had top 10 top selling patterns? Do you kind of have an idea what those are?
I mean, it's things that you probably already know too, but your parachute atoms, your caddis flies, stimulators, woolly buggers. A lot of those all move pretty well. The other thing, we have a pretty good selection of flies for spay fishing, or for people that want to go catch salmon or steelhead. Exactly. So, we do get a lot of people buying like spring wigglers and, little things like that. We have kind of a Michigan contingency of people that shop with us as well. And we do carry some flies like that as well for.
Yeah. And you do have some standard. I picked up some standard steelhead, like traditional wet flies, right? So you guys do a little bit so sounds like you do a little bit of everything, right? You got a little selection of flies. So if somebody wanted to come in, and if they have questions for you, like say somebody isn't seeing a pattern or something like that, where should we direct them?
If they're not seeing a pattern, I would say email us at support@jacksonholeflycompany.com. And maybe we do have the pattern. Maybe it's back ordered, or maybe it's something we want to get tied. Like I said, 1,000 patterns, sometimes it gets a little unwieldy to keep track of.
I know.
And the other thing is the previous owner, he still has, he has a lot of flies like sitting in his garage or, in inventory. So I can always go and say, hey, do you still have these? So there's always opportunity out there, but so it's funny like that.
Gotcha. Talk about that, Gray. I'm not sure how well you know Kirk, but you mentioned you bought this shop from Kirk. What's it sounds like he's still around, and what's do you know much about him in the past business?
Yeah, I do actually. He's a great guy. He's been around Teton County, the Jackson Hole area, I think since like his family moved here, I think in 1965, maybe a little earlier than that. His family bought a ranch north of Jackson called the Heart Six Ranch, and they ran that, I think, up into maybe the 90s even. And then his family sold it, and Kirk has done, I think, a handful of things in Teton County as well. He's been a manager of a bar. He's done other things, but in 1978, he saw an opportunity to sell flies in this region, and especially to the national parks. So he was on a weekly basis driving up the Yellowstone and hitting all the little shops and gas stations in Yellowstone and in Grand Teton National Park and selling them flies. And eventually the business grew, and then it became more regional. And then he hired a handful of sales reps, and they started helping him out. And, but yeah, he definitely grew this thing from the ground up, which is pretty cool. It's a cool story. And, it's a 42-year-old business, or 44-year-old business at this point. So it's been around.
That is cool. It reminds me of we had episode 303 where we talked about the Umpqua feather merchant story. And it was interesting because Russ talked about the history probably in a similar time. I think it was maybe the 80s when those two guys were going around. In fact, I think, they went around the whole country, but they okay, we're going to sell these flies and we're going to travel, and we're going to get in our VW van and travel around. And actually, I think it was the late 60s when they did that. But a similar deal, right? People need flies, especially in the summertime when shops are running out. That's a good time to deliver your flies.
Absolutely. And, now with the internet and, the technology that is out there, it's a lot easier to sort of do what Kirk created from the ground up. So, and again, who knew? And nobody really knew that in Jackson Hole, 5 minutes from my house, was a fly fishing distribution company that had been around for 40 years, which is pretty crazy.
That is pretty crazy. What is, you're doing all this, you got the rods, and you got the gear and flies, about all the stuff you do, and you got a very, a background, a cool background as well. What do you love most about just the whole fly shop and what you're doing now?
For me, it's my employees. They're into it. They love fishing, love it. And like these guys are going out after work, before work, skipping work. And they talk about it. They learn from one another. And they're going on little trips. It's great. It's just awesome to just see how passionate they are about it. And then, to, watch them have conversations with, we do every so often have people come in and they'll just jump on them and talk to them about fishing and things like that and get them all set up. But it's really just their passion.
Yeah.
That I love. And, we have 3 dogs in the shop as well all the time, which is great. So
Oh, nice.
I feel really lucky.
What kind of dogs are they?
We got 1 black lab and 2 corgis. One of them's brown or kind of reddish and white. One's black, and they all get along. The corgis are smaller than the black lab, so they try to, impose their small presence on the black lab. It's pretty funny.
Yeah, that's great. Who are the? So just give us a perspective on some of your employees. Do you have just a few people in there, or what does your staff look like?
Yeah, we have. I have pretty much 3 full-time employees. Brian Berger is he's been around. He came with the business when I bought it.
Oh, wow.
He's been involved now for, I think, about 15 years. Incredibly knowledgeable. Like, he's my go-to guy on all the materials that we need to tie flies. And that's something we can talk about a little bit too. But he's super knowledgeable on like amounts, material types, sourcing materials, and then he just understands the business through and through. So it's my main guy. And then I've got a woman named Allie Harris, who awesome. She's been here for like 4 or 5 years now. She came with the business as well. Super passionate about fishing. Just puts her head down, works hard. She's lived in the valley for years and years and years and has done all sorts of different jobs, but really loves this. And she's kind of the mom of the shop.
Yeah.
Helps take care of all of us a little bit. And then we got a younger guy named Misha, not a total millennial, but he's got some characteristics.
Sure. That's right.
But he's super passionate about it. Very good energy. And he kind of has been helping me a lot with multimedia stuff as well. Not only, helping with the day-to-day running of the business as far as filling orders and receiving all sorts of flies and looking at, that sort of stuff. But he's also helping with multimedia, social media, stuff like that. So that's been super helpful. But great energy. And then, we do have some other people. I have some part-time people. I've got a young guy named Jack Henderson who he's a college kid now, but he works for us in the summers. Incredibly passionate about fishing and very good.
Yep.
You go on that kid's Instagram page and you're just like, man, and you're only 20 or 7 or 19 or whatever. He's just getting out there and doing it. And so that's pretty awesome. And
yeah.
And then other than that, we've had some people, kind of revolving door here and there. But I've been really lucky, honestly, in the labor environment here in Jackson Hole. I've been really lucky with my employees, and so I feel super fortunate.
Yeah, exactly.
But it's fun.
That's great. Well, talk about that a little bit. You mentioned the materials. Just to dig in a little bit on the flies, how does all of that work? Are you guys producing, are you tying your own flies? Are you getting them out? And then how does material selection come into this?
Okay, so we get our flies tied in Kenya, Africa, which there is a whole history of the English having the Kenyans tie their flies from, a couple centuries ago.
Yep.
And so we've continued that tradition in a sense and getting our flies tied there. And we source all of our materials out of the United States, all of our, our hooks, all of our hackle, all of our, you name it, marabou, and, any sort of material you can think of, bucktails, elk skin, deer skin. And then we ship all of our fly making materials to Kenya to whatever, I have about somewhere between 8 and 10 or 11 fly tying little manufacturers contracted out of Kenya. And so then we just give them fly pattern orders, and the fly tires are good at specific things, or we're training them to be good at specific patterns. Like I've got one tyer who he ties all our foam because he's getting good at it. His tires are getting good at it, or they've been good at it. And so just for consistency, for quality control and things like that. Or we have some other guys that are, tie a lot of our beadhead nymphs, or we have a lot of guys that tie, a lot of our streamers. So,
yep.
But, and that logistically can be tricky. It's tricky.
Yeah, because you've got all these materials coming from the U.S. that now you got to get them over there. So that's one thing and especially with all the changes COVID, I'm not sure if that mixed it up, but then you got to get them back, right? So
yeah.
Have you had some hitches in that logistical thing?
Logistically, it's tricky. So there's a couple things going on. I mean, everything has to come through customs, and so that gets hard at times.
Right.
Shipments get lost,
and like wild animals, right? They think you're shipping an endangered species or something, right?
Well, that's what I was going to get to. So there's a permitting process for specific endangered species. Primarily for us, it's peacock. And that permitting is called a CITE permit. And so if the shipment does not have a CITE permit in it and we're shipping peacock, I mean, it can easily be confiscated. So, that's something that I have to be very, strict with my tires and say, you guys need to make sure that these permits are included and the exact number of pieces of peacock. I mean, it gets down to like the number, you can lose an entire shipment. So I've actually narrowed down the number of tires that deal with peacock to just a handful, just because it's such a, I know I've experienced it where we've lost entire fly shipments, and that it stings.
Oh,
for the tire, for me, for our dealers and people that we're selling flies to, because we're not, our direct to consumer is actually a very small part of our actual business. We're selling, I think we sold 90,000 dozen flies in 2022.
Oh, wow. So this is going out you're selling these out to other businesses.
Yeah. So our primary business is wholesaling to other dealers and other distributors throughout North America.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Wow. That's amazing.
So you can only imagine what 90,000 dozen flies looks like.
I can't even add that. Yeah. What is 90,000 dozen? That's crazy.
Yeah.
Okay. So you have this huge thing going here, and that's right there. I mean, yeah, just numbers wise. So you got this massive amounts of material. And are you pretty much shipping, and do you do like once a month, you send out a bunch of materials back overseas and then you get flies in once a month, or how's that look?
Yeah, it's not necessarily once a month, but it's definitely, maybe quarterly or.
Oh, okay. Coming over on a boat or on a plane?
Everything's by plane.
Yeah, it's all plane. So you can get it within a few days.
Well, in theory.
Or in theory, yeah.
In theory, but things get held up. Again, things have to go through Fish and Wildlife as they're imported back into the United States. So it all takes time, but we've got a pretty good system down at this point. And I have, again, a handful of really great fly tires in Kenya that understand the business, and and I'm trying to help support them too. And they've got tires who have families, and so. It goes a long way to kind of help them out with this little industry. So,
yeah, definitely. What's your, if you probably struggle like me to get out fishing sometimes, but if you were to go fishing, do you have a home, like a river or a stream or something you like to hit up?
Yeah. I mean, where I am located in Teton County, we're about 45 minutes or so, 50 minutes from the Green River. Down actually south of us in Sublette County. We're in Teton County, and Sublette County is the next county south. So I like to go there. It's a little quieter. It's not quite as nutty as being in Jackson Hole in the summer.
Yeah.
But I also live I have, there's a couple little creeks in my backyard, and I also live pretty close to the Snake River. So, now, we have a drift boat, so we'll go pop it in the water and do like an afternoon summer float, or I'll go, wade fish somewhere. The opportunities are really quite endless in this,
Yeah.
area of the country and area of the world. But yeah, my favorite, if I have the time, and it's typically going down for like a weekend of camping and fishing, is to go down to the Green River.
To the green. Yeah.
Yeah.
And what's your drift boat? What do you have there?
We have a Hyde 16-foot low pro XL.
Yeah. Oh, low pro. Yeah.
Yeah,
So this is definitely.
It's a good boat for, it's a great boat for fishing out of, but it's also a great boat for camping, so you can get all your gear in there and it's still seaworthy enough. It's not one of the, like saltwater skiffs that has a really flat nose. It's
super
still
low. Yeah.
It's still got a pointy nose. So, if you want to go, say, on the South Fork or, some of the bigger rivers, and you're weighted down with camping gear or whatever, it's still a good boat to row, and it, tracks down the river pretty easily, and it's pretty easy to maneuver. So it's a great boat.
Yeah, Hyde's obviously been around for a long time, and there's a bunch of good boats out there now. That's the cool thing. We did a little series on drift boats a while back and dug into some of the history, so I'm always interested there. And so the Green River is good. So give me your on the green if you're going out there. I'm not even sure this time of year if it's even what it's like, but your top. So 2 flies, you got to fish for the green. What are you taking out of your fly selection there?
Top flies, God, I think it would probably have to be like a black, like peanut envy streamer.
Oh yeah.
And or probably some sort of nymph, like Duracell. Those are pretty good these days.
Yep. So a little stream. So that gives us a little insight into you. So you do some streamers and some nymphy. So you kind of mix it up.
I prefer to streamer fish. Watching a bobber for me isn't as exciting. I'll do it.
Yeah.
If that's the way you're going to catch fish, is watching a bobber. I'll do it all day long, but I prefer to throw streamers, and I love throwing dry flies too. It's just, I feel like dry fly season is pretty specific, whereas I think streamer fishing and nymphing you can pretty much do year round,
Yeah, that's right.
Especially in this area. It gets cold. The winter times are pretty harsh, but you can still go fish in the winter if you're hardy enough. And there's certain days where it warms up in the middle of the day, and you can get out and be pretty successful.
Yeah, this is the time. How are things looking? Well, you mentioned the snowpack a while back. Is it?
It's.
Yeah, I guess that's not looking good, or what's that looking like?
Well, interestingly enough, most of the winter was pretty light on snow. We were hovering, I think, around the beginning of April. We were hovering right around 300 inches of total snowpack for the year, which is relatively low for this area of the country. And, especially in the last decade, we've, had a lot of high 400, mid 500 and higher inch snowpack years, which has been great. It's recharged our reservoirs and the lakes, and, it's been incredible. But this year it's been quite low. But in the last couple of weeks, we've all of a sudden had a couple of really big snowstorms, and I'm sure you guys have been getting hit maybe in the Northwest as well.
Yep.
But getting hammered, which is good, because outside of worries about water for fishing and water for drinking is, wildfires at this point.
Right.
At this point in our history, in all these places that are fairly forested. So that's important, but also, the health of the fisheries. Our 2 biggest reservoirs right now are, below 10% full at this point. So, we need a lot of snowpack over the next couple of years to kind of help recharge those, because, there's water rights down the Snake River. And once those are called somewhere in Idaho or further down the river in Oregon, it can be problematic for us. So
yeah, it is. It's we had a guest. I guess we were talking Colorado in the last couple weeks, and there's the best example, right? A river that essentially doesn't make it to the ocean,
Right.
or make it. That's the extreme example, but yeah, I think everybody's really worried about that, right? Because nobody really knows exactly. Is there going to be more wildfires? Is the drought thing going to continue, or is this just a small little glimpse in the this long history of obviously the planet changing? It's
completely.
It's tough to get a feel for. Yeah,
it is. No, it's really tough to get a feel for it, and I don't know if being dogmatic about it helps. I look at it as we need the water and we need the snowpack, and obviously in this area of the country, people love to ski too. It's part of the economy in this area, but having that water in the summer is part of the economy too. People come here for float trips, they come here to fish, they come here just to enjoy the views or swimming in the water, and then obviously we need it to live. So it's important, and we're the headwater for a lot of places. I mean, we're the top of the continental divide goes right through this area of the country, and the Tetons and the Wind River Range. I mean, those are the headwaters for a lot of places in the western part of the United States.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, the Tetons are amazing. Well, let's start to take it out of here in a bit.
Yeah.
And you mentioned photos, so I don't want to miss a couple of good photo tips. So what would be if somebody's out there tomorrow, they're heading out in the river and they've got either their cell phone or maybe an SLR, what are a couple of photo tips you'd give somebody to make sure they can get a good, whether that's a fish picture or just a scenic picture?
Don't be afraid to turn the camera horizontal or vertical. Typically, it's horizontal, but or turn it vertical. But with your iPhone, a lot of people, they're taking pictures solely vertical. Sometimes you might want to turn it horizontal to get a better photo. With your phone, I really like using the portrait mode to shoot people holding fish, because it kind of blurs the background out and helps that fish pop out, or the person. Those are two things I think when you're using your iPhone that are really helpful. It's also nice to have a decent background, but that's not totally necessary. With an SLR, have it accessible, because the last thing you want is to have some fish, that's struggling while you're trying to get your DSLR or SLR together and all that sort of stuff. So have it super accessible. And then again, don't be afraid to turn that camera horizontal or vertical. Probably need to understand a little bit more about your depth of field, but
where would somebody go? I mean, there seems like there's so many resources out there with, and you probably learned a long time ago, so you don't know, but you just go to YouTube and start finding somebody that looks good.
YouTubing or using YouTube is such a great resource to learn so much about, photography, and one other, learning how to tie knots. It's a great place to learn how to tie knots.
Yeah, tie knots, exactly. Well, we've got a photographer coming on, a couple. I'm going to hit into that in an upcoming episode to help people, dig in, because, it's a struggle for me. I know. I mean, I got the phone and I can take a picture. I actually just got a new iPhone, so it's got 3 cameras on the back. And supposedly, it does everything for you. But still, I've also got an SLR that's just been collecting dust for too long, and I think that's something I need to break out and really probably just take a little course. I think I like the courses, maybe something that can just get me dialed in, get started on it, get back into it.
Totally. Well, and the nice thing about the SLR is, the pictures that with the different lenses and stuff. I mean, you can, the variety of photographs that you can get just from one vantage point is so variable, and you can get so much cool stuff. And, so it's not maybe just about shooting people holding fish, but it's, being able to shoot the experience and really document the experience, whether you're on a river trip or you're just on a day of fishing with your friends or something like that. But the number one thing is if the camera is not accessible or you don't want to carry it around, then it's not a good camera to have.
Yeah.
So that's where the iPhones and the smartphones at this point, I mean, they're amazing.
I know. Yeah, it's right there. They are amazing. Nice. Well, I think I had a couple of random ones I want to throw out there. And anything else before we leave off the shop? I mean, obviously, if people want to connect with you, Jackson Hole Flight Company, I'll have links in the show notes for this one as well. But yeah, anything else you want to give a shout out there?
I would just say check in with us often. We're always running different sales, whether, right now we're doing a spring sale, 20% off spring sale. But, we're always running little sales here and there or, little things. So check in, and we're always adding new fly patterns, different products, different merchandise, hats, T-shirts, things like that. So yeah, check in with us often. Okay,
perfect. Well, we'll do that. So, and I wanted to circle back around. We talked a little about conservation, and I think we can hold off any of those additional conservation questions as we go, because that's something I'm always focusing on, trying to support. And you do. I was reading a little bit of somewhere on your background. You have a good, definitely you have a good focus, right? Conservation is a big part of what you do. Is that just give us a little minute there on that? Is that pretty important to you?
Well, one thing I haven't mentioned is I'm actually an elected official here in Teton County too. I'm a county commissioner. So.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. One part of.
Amazing.
Yeah. So I wear a lot of hats.
That's not an easy job, right? Because I'm not even sure how all that works, but the buck kind of stops with you a little bit as far as what gets done out there in the county.
Yeah. I mean, we're the representatives for local government in the county. And, a big part of the sort of ethos behind Teton County is definitely conservation. Again, as I mentioned, we're the headwaters for so many other parts of the West. We have wildlife all over the place. 97% of Teton County is public land, whether it's national forest or national parks. So there's a lot of responsibility, but it's a balancing act of community and conservation, and it's become trickier and trickier. But, I think pretty much everybody or most people that live in Teton County, conservation is definitely one of those things. But, a lot of my friends that hunt and fish, they may, again, not be super dogmatic about the rhetoric that's out there, with the mainstream media, but they're some of the best conservationists I know, which is awesome. They're the ones that are, leaving no trace when they go hunt. They're the ones who are teaching, the young people, like, how do you treat your wilderness? How do you treat the wildlife? The importance of managing the resource, the importance of managing wildlife populations or fish populations, things like that. And I think that that's a part of this whole story that never gets talked about that much. Then talking about cleanliness of water and cleanliness or keeping the landscape from being destroyed and things like that.
Right. And part of that might be, especially with you in the area, right? These national parks. You got millions of visitors or whatever, right? How do you keep that pristine? That must be a little bit of a challenge.
It's a challenge, but that's the federal government does a pretty good job with the national parks, I think. They're probably underfunded, but they've been underfunded for years. But they do a pretty good job. I think it's pretty special that, a lot of these people from all over the country get to come to Yellowstone or Grand Teton National Park and have a pretty amazing outdoor experience. A little bit may feel like a zoo in a sense, and I don't mean this in a negative way, but you see animals on the side of the road and things like that. But at the same time, those are real wild animals. You've seen the YouTube videos when people approach a buffalo.
Yeah. I think that's why it's cool. And we had a buffalo experience, and we've had multiple when we were there, when we went through the park. And yeah, there was some good and bad. Sometimes it felt crazy because you had to start 2 hours before just to get in the park, right? If you didn't hit it right, you'd be stuck in a line. But it's that wild, right? It's like seeing a buffalo. And for some of these people, that might change. That might be the difference between them long term appreciating the nature and conservation and not, right? So that's why I think the national parks are so important. Even though, I think it's good that 90% of the people stay within 100 feet of their car, because they're still getting that taste of it. And then eventually they might get out and become like you, right? This backcountry person where now they're traveling and they're taking it to the extreme.
Absolutely. I think it's incredibly important that people at least have that experience and understand that places like this exist.
Yep. Exactly.
And so I feel fortunate that, I got to grow up here and that I'm able to still live here, and I'm running a business here, and I'm hopefully representing Jackson Hole in a positive way. But ultimately I want people to enjoy the outdoors, and fly fishing is a great way to get out and do it.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that you started off at the start with that, talking about, that is a good thing. So some people don't want to get into skiing or whatever sport, but fly fishing, even though it seems kind of hard, I guess that's the struggle, is that we've got to show everybody, especially the new people, that, man, it's actually not that hard just to get started, right? You kind of get your rod, and, as long as you can get some help with casting, that's probably the biggest hurdle to getting going, right?
Yeah, casting and tying a couple basic knots.
Yep.
And after that, it really is enjoyable, and it's a puzzle. And I think for a lot of people, it's not just, it's about using your brain a little bit too, and just, cracking that code every day you go out.
Yeah. Very cool. Very cool. Okay, Greg, before we get out of here, give us your, you mentioned smoked salmon, and of course it's one of my favorite foods as well. But you could have smoked trout. Is there, it sounded like you did a little bit of that. Do you have a tip on that?
No, it was so long ago. It was so long ago that I was doing that. I mean, I would love to still do it. I just haven't, but I love it. I eat it. I try to find, good smoked salmon and stuff like that. But, the only thing I say is always buy Alaska wild caught. That's my main
Oh, really?
thing. Yeah.
Yeah. And why, and that's just because, why is that? For somebody who doesn't know, why not do a hatchery salmon?
I think it's healthier. Farm salmon, the more you dig into it, it's a little bit gnarly. So I'm about the wild caught, and I want to support those fisheries and fishermen and women up in Alaska that are out there doing it.
Yeah, exactly. We did an episode on kind of part of the, we did a couple, but we did one on Norway, and then we had another couple where we were talking about Atlantic salmon, right, and that whole farmed thing that's going on. And I mean, that's still, you don't realize it, but that's still a major thing that's impacting. And I don't know the whole history, right? But that's something that I think on the lines that you're talking about, right? Versus farm versus wild fish.
Yeah.
You have that too. So, okay, well, Greg, there's always tons of topics, we can dig into. Well, I feel like we did a good job kind of digging into a little bit of what you do, and obviously getting to know you a little bit. This has been awesome. Just give a heads up here in the next year or whatever. What do you expect now with what you have going? Are you going to keep doubling down on the flies, or anything you want to give a shout out you have coming up?
I mean, we just want to keep growing. We're trying to bring and include more people into the sport. I mean, that's important to me. Getting more women into fly fishing, I think, is a push for us. And however we can do that. And I don't know. I think a lot of companies out there are trying to solve that same problem right now, of sort of diversifying their interest group and things like that. And we're just going to keep plugging along and pushing how fun it is, and that it's a great way to spend time with friends and family or by yourself. So
right on. All right, Greg. Well, hopefully I'll be hooking up with you sometime in the next year. I'd love to stop in and say hi for sure. And but until then, thanks for taking the time. We'll send everybody out to jhflyco.com if they have questions or want to pick up some flies or gear. And thanks for all the time today.
Thank you. And we'll jump in the boat and go for a float, and hopefully.
Good. Yeah, I haven't been in a Hyde. That's right. That's one boat that I've been in I've been in some classic crafts, but I haven't been in a Hyde yet. And so that would be one boat. I'll have to hit you up on that.
Perfect.
All right. Thanks, Ray.
Have a good one, Dave. And thank you.
So there it is. wetflyswing.com/331. 331 will get you the links, the show notes, and some good stuff. If you want to get a discount right now from Jackson Hole, you can do that right now. jhflyco.com/swing. That'll get you 25% off your first order at Jackson Hole. You support this podcast by clicking through that link to Jackson. Not much else to talk about today except for the top fly challenge. You can head over to wetflyswing.com/topfly and quickly enter that through that link and choose your top fly. And actually, you can choose what you think is the top fly out of some of the guests we've had on the show as well. That'll get you entered in to win some of those fly boxes we have going. Power packed and ready to roll. I'm going to get out of here. That is all I have for you today, and we are going to be moving on into the next one. So stay tuned. We got some good stuff ahead. Hope you have a good morning, noon, or evening. See you online or see you on the water.
Thanks for listening to the Wet Fly Swing Fly Fishing Show. For notes and links from this episode, visit wetflyswing.com.